discuss one of my most favorite topics, mechanics of pulmonary ventilation. I named this video as part 1 because I'm going to do another video which is going to be based on obstructive and restrictive diseases with all the FEV1 and FVC graphs. So, in order to better understand that topic, obstructive and restrictive pulmonary diseases, you need to know the mechanics of pulmonary ventilation and the basics. So, that is why I divided this into two halves, part 1 and part 2. So, after watching part 1, please don't forget to watch part 2 so that you can completely understand the fundamentals of this topic. So let us begin by understanding and taking a look at how the lungs are positioned in the chest cavity and what are the associated structures present around it. So the lungs float freely in the chest cavity surrounded by pleura and pleural fluid. So basically it's not attached to the chest wall by any structure, it's only attached at the hilum. It actually floats freely and it is surrounded by pleura and pleural fluid. There is a diaphragm below it and the abdominal muscles attached around, the abdominal muscles are attached on the rib cage around it and even below it. So this is a diagram which shows you the lungs and the surrounding structures. As we can look over here, there's the diaphragm located just beneath the lungs. Okay. So you can understand that it has a major role in the mechanics, as we will discuss. Next we have the rectus abdominis muscle. There are also muscles of the trunk, etc., which help us in expiration. Please note that inspiration is an active process and expiration is a passive process. An active process means it requires energy. So inspiration requires energy and there's also movement of muscles. So that's why it requires energy. Whereas expiration is said to be a passive process because it occurs due to the elastic recoil of the lungs and the chest cavity. Okay, now so we can see inhalation. So now we're going to talk about the diaphragm and its role in the mechanics. So the diaphragm basically contracts, and when it contracts it moves down. So as it moves down, it creates a negative pressure inside the chest cavity. And when it creates a negative pressure or a suction pressure, the chest cavity pressure has decreased. So now pressure or air moves from a gradient from a high pressure to a low pressure. So air from the outer atmosphere, which is positive, is going to move inside. So it fills. So basically our lungs get filled during inspiration or inhalation when our diaphragm contracts and the negative pressure is created and the air moves inside. Again, emphasizing on the same fact, for movement of the lungs, you either need to increase the length of the chest cavity, that is along the vertical axis, or you need to increase the anterior posterior diameter of the chest cavity. So basically by doing either of these, you're increasing or decreasing the pressure. So when you play with the pressures is when the air will move inside or outside, for moving air inside or outside the lungs. This is a simple diagram that I made to help you better understand the mechanics. So as we can see, the white domed structure is the chest cavity. These are the lungs and the trachea and all connecting to the outside air, and below the brownish structure is the diaphragm. So normally this is the diaphragm in its resting state. So as we can see, this is the normal length of the chest cavity. But when we take a breath in or we inspire, that time our diaphragm contracts and moves down, and as we can see, the length of the chest cavity is now increased. So the negative pressure is created. So when this negative pressure is created, it's going to equilibrate by pulling air from the atmosphere inside. You can also refer to some of those projects made on YouTube. You can find some videos where children make those projects, the balloon thing and all with the bottle. You can see it on the net. So the next one is the anterior posterior diameter of the chest cavity. So in a normal anatomical position of our ribs in a resting state, our ribs are not placed horizontally as we would expect it, but it's placed at an angle slightly pointing downwards. Okay, so and the sternum, because the ribs are placed downwards, the sternum slightly tilts backwards towards the vertebral column. However, when we inspire, our external intercostal muscles contract and they elevate the rib cage, they move it up, and this increases the anterior posterior diameter. Also, as the rib cage moves moves up, the sternum is attached to the rib cage, as everybody knows. So the sternum also moves away from the vertebral column. So this is respectively called the bucket handle movement and the pump handle movement. The pump handle is for the sternum and the bucket handle is for the rib cage. And the way I've always understood this is, if you take both of your hands and touch them together at the center, forming like a cavity in the middle, and you will like imagining that your fingers are your ribs, then you will understand what I'm talking about. If you place your hands like slightly downward, okay, so this is like your normal position, and then you raise your hands up that, so then you can understand that the diameter is increasing. So any muscle which elevates your rib cage will be your muscles of inspiration, because they are helping you increase the anterior posterior diameter of the chest cavity. And any muscle which depresses your rib cage will be your expiratory muscles. So again, when you're increasing either the anterior posterior diameter of the chest cavity, or you're increasing the vertical axis, along the vertical axis, you're increasing the volume. And when you increase the volume of the chest cavity, you're decreasing the pressure. So that is how it correlates. So when you increase the volume, you decrease the pressure, and when you decrease the pressure, the air will flow from the atmosphere inside your lungs. We have your inspiratory muscles and your expiratory muscles. In your inspiratory muscles, obviously the most important one is your diaphragm. So normal respiration occurs only by a contraction of your diaphragm. So when your diaphragm moves down, your inspiration happens, and then when it relaxes by passive elastic recoil, there is expiration. And these are like your accessory muscles. So external intercostals elevate the rib cage. The sternocleidomastoid again is connected to the sternum and the mastoid process, so it helps elevate your sternum. Then the serratus anterior is also a muscle which is present on the ribs, which help elevate it. Then the scalene muscles, they attach to the first two ribs, they also help elevate the ribs. They are like your accessory muscles, but the main muscle is like the diaphragm. And then the second most important is your external intercostals. Next we have the expiratory muscles. So now for expiration, this note that this is only for forced expiration, because normal expiration is a passive process and it takes place because of elastic recoil. But when you can't expire fast enough, when your rate of when you're like respiring very fast and you need rapid expiration, so for that we need extra help, and we get this extra help from the abdominal muscles, like the abdominal recti and the internal intercostals. The internal intercostals depress your ribs. So the abdominal recti, they perform two functions. They themselves contract and help push the diaphragm like back up or relax, and as well as they push the abdominal contents upwards towards the diaphragm. So again, decreasing the vertical length of your chest cavity. So this helps to increase the rate of expiration needed when you are respiring very fast. This is like forced expiration. We spoke about the mechanical processes that help move air in and out of the lungs. So now let's focus on a more important topic, which is the pressures that help move the air in and out of the lung. So our first pressure is the pleural pressure, and it is the pressure of the fluid present in the pleural space. And I forgot to mention this previously, but when I spoke about the lungs floating freely in the chest cavity, actually you can say like they're kind of glued to the chest wall. They're not attached, but they're kind of glued, and this is because of the pleural fluid. The pleural fluid normally has a negative pressure, normally like -5 centimeters of water. So this pressure is like a suction pressure, and it see, the visceral layer of the pleura is attached to the lung, while the parietal pleura is attached to the chest wall. So, and the space between them is the pleural space, which where the pleural fluid is present. So this negative suction pressure like attaches the chest wall and the lung together, if you get what I'm saying. So normally at rest, to keep the lungs open, okay, we need about negative pressure. We need a negative pressure in the pleural space, the pleural fluid. And during inspiration, where you further need to negatively increase this pressure, because this suction pressure acts like a suction on the outer surface of the alveoli. So imagine an alveoli and the forces are acting outward. So this opens the alveoli and helps the alveoli inflate, distends the alveoli basically. So it becomes further more negative during inspiration, minus 7.5 centimeters of H2O, and then the reverse happens during expiration. So that is your pleural pressure. The alveolar pressure is the pressure inside the alveoli, the intra-alveolar pressure. So now when your glottis is open and there is no airflow at all, so obviously because the glottis is open, there is no airflow, whatever pressure is there outside is going to be the same as inside, because it's going to equilibrate. The pressure is going to balance out, like from the air into, because there's no airflow, so it's going to balance out throughout the entire respiratory tree. But if you want to inspire this, the pressure inside the alveoli has to be less as compared to the pressure in the atmosphere. So during inspiration, this pressure inside the alveoli will fall to minus 1 centimeters of water, and during expiration, because you have to force air out, you have to be higher than the atmospheric pressure. So during expiration, it rises to about plus 1 centimeter of H2O. And here this can become slightly tricky to understand, because as in pleural pressure, the normal pressure, pleural pressure at rest is minus 5 centimeter of H2O. Then during inspiration it rises to, negatively rises to minus 7.5 centimeter of H2O. And then again when you expire, it goes back to minus 5 centimeters of water. However, this is not the case with alveolar pressure, since it does not go like at rest, it is 0 centimeters of water, because it's in equilibrium with the atmosphere. So it does not go from 0 to minus 1 on inspiration and then again back to 0. It goes to plus 1 during expiration. So to understand this, we have to look at the next diagram that I made. So here hopefully you will understand why we have to increase the pressure during expiration. So at the end of expiration, that is at FRC, the pulmonary alveolar pressure is 0, and note that PA is atmospheric pressure and PALV is the alveolar pressure. So here your alveolar pressure is 0, which means because it is at rest at end of expiration and the entire system is in equilibrium, there's no airflow basically. The next one, as you can see on your right hand side, during inspiration, as your rib cage expands, it creates a negative pressure, so even your alveoli have an outward negative suction pressure, is what I explained before. So now the alveoli are going to distend, and when the alveoli distend or increase in volume, again the pressure is going to decrease, so it becomes less than that of your atmospheric pressure. Atmospheric pressure is 0 centimeters of H2O, and so now your alveolar pressure is going to become minus 1 centimeters of water, so that is less than 0. So now air is going to rush into it. Now again, though your alveoli is distended at the end of inspiration, the alveolar pressure inside the alveolar pressure again becomes 0, because now again once the air has filled it again, there is airflow during inspiration, and now again at the end of inspiration there is no airflow. So again, because there is no airflow, again there is a equilibrium. The atmospheric pressure has balanced out the pressure inside, so now the alveolar pressure again is 0. So this basically is the reason why again we need to increase this pressure during expiration. So during expiration, again, as the you can say the chest walls contract, so the alveoli contract, the alveolar contract, the volume decreases, the pressure increases. So now the pressure becomes higher than the atmospheric pressure, which is, the atmospheric pressure is 0 centimeters of water, so the alveolar pressure becomes plus 1 centimeter of water, so more than that. So again air flows out, because it flows according to a concentration, not a concentration gradient, a gradient, a pressure gradient. So basically the main thing to understand was that at the end of inspiration, again our alveoli, though distended, are again in equilibrium with the atmospheric pressure. This is in contrast with the pleural pressure, which goes from -5 to -7.5, and again to minus again during expiration it decreases to -5. But note that it's always like a negative pressure. This is because we have to maintain the lungs open to a certain degree. Our lungs can never be completely collapsed, because then it would be very difficult to inspire. Like again, like from you cannot inflate the lungs from scratch, so our lungs can never be completely collapsed. It needs a slight negative pressure, and that pressure is your pleural pressure. In vivo, that happens in vivo. If you remove the lungs out in vitro, then the lungs will collapse because it does not have this pleural pressure, etc. Now my favorite, transpulmonary pressure, or represented as PTP. It is a pressure difference between that present inside the alveoli, or the intraalveolar pressure, and that in the pleura, or the pleural pressure. Or in easier words, transpulmonary pressure is the pressure difference across the entire lung, from inside the alveoli to outside, that is the pleural surface, across the entire lung. Its value is the same as that of the recoil pressure of the lung, the elastic recoil pressure of the lung, or the pressure that tends to collapse the lung at every instant of time. Though the value of the transpulmonary pressure is the same as that of the recoil pressure, please note that the transpulmonary pressure is actually the force that is opposing the recoil pressure of the lung, the recoil of the lung. So though it is same in value, its action is opposite to that of the recoil pressure of the lung. So in other words, it can also be called as the distending pressure of the lung. It's the entire like pressure difference across the entire lung. And in a normal lung, this pressure is always positive, which means it pulls outward, so it keeps the lung, helps to keep the lung open. So the PTP, or the transpulmonary pressure, is the pressure inside the alveolus minus the pressure outside, or the pleural pressure. So the alveolar pressure minus the pleural pressure. So here in this diagram we can see what I was talking about earlier, that the transpulmonary pressure is the pressure across the entire lung. Okay, and normally the PTP is positive. Also note that though the values of the alveolar pressure and the pleural pressure may fluctuate between negative or positive, the end difference, that is the transpulmonary pressure, should always be positive, because the greater the difference between the alveolar pressure and the pulmonary and the pleural pressure, the more is the transpulmonary pressure, the more is the distending pressure. So the bigger in size the lung will be, and more, there will be more elastic recoil, the recoil pressure also will be more. When you think about this according to the equation, you can understand why the recoil pressure will be more, because the value is the same as that of the transpulmonary pressure. So the more the transpulmonary pressure, the more the recoil pressure. But if you want to understand it, so then you can think about like elastic rubber band. Like when you, so there are elastic structures present inside the lung parenchyma. So normally they are in a kinked state, and when you contract them they become unkinked. So now there is more pressure, it's like a stretched rubber band, and when a rubber band is stretched, you know that there's a lot of pressure, a lot of tension. So the moment you leave, this pressure is going to like contract, so basically the recoil pressure is high. To understand this in depth, I have made two parallel diagrams. One is the normal lungs at FRC, and the other one is in like pneumothorax. So first let's concentrate on the left hand side diagram. So at FRC, when there is no airflow, the alveolar pressure is 0 centimeters of water, so that's why I wrote 0. And then the pleural pressure at FRC again is that is at the end of expiration is -5 centimeters of water. So 0 minus of -5, it becomes positive, so it's positive 5 centimeters of water. Since it's a positive pressure, it's a distending pressure, it helps to open the lung or inflate the lung. The red arrows shown is how your transpulmonary pressure is acting. On the other hand, in case of pneumothorax, now what is pneumothorax? Like suppose you get a stab wound, so your basically your pleura is now open, so it's in contact with the atmospheric air. So the atmospheric air rushes in, and as I mentioned before, the atmospheric air, as the air flows in, the pressure is going to be balanced. Like the air is going to flow in, like since the pleural pressure is normally negative, the air will flow in till the pressure outside in the atmosphere and inside the pleural space is balanced. So basically the atmospheric pressure, as everybody knows, is 0 centimeters of water. So now since it flows in and it balances the intrapleural pressure, the pleural pressure also becomes 0 centimeters of water. So now the transpulmonary pressure is going to be the intraalveolar pressure, which is 0, minus 0, which is the pleural pressure, because the pleural pressure now has become 0 after you stab it, or pneumothorax, due to pneumothorax. So the transpulmonary pressure is 0 centimeters of water, and now this is less than 5 centimeters, so it's a net force trying to collapse the lungs. So this is what happens in pneumothorax. This is why the lungs tend to collapse when you have a stab wound or any other kind of trauma to the chest wall. Now we will focus a bit more on the characteristics of the lung itself. So we're going to talk about the compliance of the lungs. So the compliance of the lungs is basically the extent to which the lung will expand for each increase in the transpulmonary pressure. So remember that when you inspire, your pleural pressure is not going to be -5, it's going to increase negatively. So the difference is going to be greater. So it's going to be like minus of -7.5, so it's going to be plus 7.5. So it's going to increase, the transpulmonary pressure is going to increase. So when we inspire, we want the transpulmonary pressure to increase, since that will expand the lung for us. So how much, like you're putting the pressure on the outside, but how much is your lung going to expand for whatever pressure you're going to put? That is the compliance. So it's the extent to which the lung will expand for each unit increase in the transpulmonary pressure, if enough time is allowed for the lung to equilibrate, that is for the lung to stretch. So its normal value for both lungs is about 200 ml of air per centimeter of H2O transpulmonary pressure. That is for each unit increase, for each unit transpulmonary pressure, 200 ml of air is going to be filled into the lungs, or the lungs is going to expand by that much. So in easier words, it's just the ease with which the lungs can expand, and this compliance again is affected in many more diseases, as we will discuss later in the second part. So now, compliance diagram. The compliance of the lungs depends upon the elastic forces of the lung tissue. About 1/3 of the total compliance is contributed by the elastic forces, and the second one is the surface tension of the fluid inside the alveoli, that contributes about 2/3 to the total compliance. So that is only about the lungs, but as we know, we also have like the thorax or the chest wall, and it has its own viscosity, its own elastic properties, etc. So for the combined system, the total compliance is about 110 ml per centimeter of water, basically almost like half of what it was for the lungs alone. So for each increase in each unit increase in the transpulmonary pressure, the lungs, or the entire lungs and the chest wall, the combined thing is going to inflate by 110 ml by 110 ml. So talking about here we have the compliance diagram of the lungs. So as we can look here at this graph, on the y-axis we have the lung volume change in liters, and on the x-axis we have the pleural pressure in centimeters of water. When your pleural pressure is below -5, that is like at around -4, the lung volume is 0. So note that normally our pleural pressure is not below -5. Our pleural pressure is at -5, and at -5 our lungs have a certain volume, so we don't start inflating like directly from a 0 or a totally collapsed lung volume. So now as this pleural pressure increases negatively, becomes more negative, we can see that this graph, the inspiration, I'm talking about the inspiration curve down in pink, is increasing. Okay, I only follow the inspiration curve. The volume of the lung is increasing as the pleural pressure becomes more and more negative, since we are sucking it, and the lungs are distending, as I explained earlier. And as it moves like to around -7.5, we can see that around 0.5 liters of lung volume or air is drawn inside, that is basically your tidal volume. If you go to say it, 500 ml. Now we'll take a look at the expiration curve, which is the one I drew in purple. So again, now it's just the reverse. Like now from minus 7.5, the intrapleural pressure again is going to the pleural pressure is going to decrease. So as it decreases, we can see that the lung volume also is decreasing. So this is your curve. So now the characteristics of this curve, why is this curve like this? And that is because of the factors or the characteristics of the lung. Why isn't this curve like a straight line? Why is it not increasing much from -4 to -5, and then suddenly like from -5 we can see like there's a more rapid increase? Like why is there a loop like this? So this is because of the characteristics of the lung, the elastic properties of the lung basically. Since we know that the compliance of the lung, 2/3 of it is contributed by surface tension, it's a major factor. So let us discuss about it in brief. So when there is a air and water interface, the molecules of water at the surface of the air and water interface have a special like tight attraction, the molecules of water, towards each other. They bond very closely, they have a very tight bond between each other, and this bond tends to like contract whatever surface they are present on. And if you've studied physics like in your previous classes, you may know that this is what holds the raindrops together. Like all around there's a like water air interface, so it contracts and makes it like a circular shape. So this is your surface tension. If there would be a water and water interface, or if you fill the lungs with saline or some fluid, you will see that the surface tension disappears because there is no interface. So when there's a air and fluid interface is when you get to see the phenomenon of surface tension come into play. So now our body has a natural mechanism to reduce the surface tension, because we do not want this surface tension is really high. We do not want our lung alveoli to collapse. The surface tension, the surface tension is basically the tension present in the alveoli, the alveolar fluid and the air. They form an interface. So for that we have a body secretes a surfactant, and surfactant is secreted by the type 2 alveolar epithelial cells, specialized epithelial cells, and the surfactant that they secrete consists of dipalmitoyl phosphatidylcholine, calcium ions, and surfactant apoproteins. The pressure caused by surface tension is inversely proportional to the alveolar radius. So more the alveolar radius, lesser is going to be the surface tension. I forgot to mention that the elastic forces of the lung tissue is basically contributed by the arrangement of the elastic fibers and the collagen fibers which are present in the lung parenchyma. Alright, so that contributes to about 1/3 of the entire compliance of the lungs. Since we know that inspiration is an active process, so obviously energy is required, and since energy is required, there is work. So there's work of breathing. So work of breathing or work of inspiration is there are like 3 types of works or 3 components to it, and the first one is the compliance work or the elastic work, the tissue resistance work, and then lastly the air resistance work. And this work of breathing is approximately 3 to 5% of the total energy expenditure. Out of the total energy that we expend, 3 to 5% is required for pulmonary ventilation. So compliance work is the elastic work to oppose the elastic, like basically to stretch the lungs. And then the tissue resistance work, the lungs and the chest wall have some viscosity, so to stretch them, that is the tissue resistance work. And then the air resistance work is to bring the air inside, so there's normally some resistance to airflow, so that's airway resistance work. So we are done with this topic. Thank you everybody for patiently listening. If you have any doubts, you can write them down in the comment section. But don't forget to watch part 2. In part 2 we're going to discuss about the obstructive and the restrictive diseases. So all the concepts that we discussed today is going to be applied, or there's going to be a further elaboration on that in part 2, so that we can completely understand the obstructive and restrictive diseases of the lung. So as always, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Thank you. See you next time.